The NICU has some pretty strict rules on visitors. So Patrick or I had to be there at bedside. There had to be a parent, and you could only have 2 other people, so a total of 3, one being a parent. So Patrick took my parents down to see him, and the nurse that was on during the day told them that Patrick would be the only one to hold him. And so because of his central line. So at that time he was on oxygen, and he had a central line and a few other cords and everything attached to him. And so Patrick got to hold him for the first time, and my parents were there and they took some pictures. They visited for a little bit, and Patrick came back and told me everything. Like later that night, Cindy, Patrick's mom, comes and visits, and Patrick takes her down, and the night nurse lets her hold him. Apparently there was a misunderstanding, and it wasn't that only the parent, it was that the nurse was the parent could not transfer the baby. A nurse had to be the one to transfer the baby from person to person. So Patrick's mom was able to hold him. And then on Sunday, once my fever broke and it had been 24 hours, I got to go down finally and to hold him. They had taken my catheter out. They had thought that could have been the reason that I had a spike, a slight infection from that possibly. Getting up for the first time after a C-section, that was hard. That was painful. That hurt. And walking hurt for the first day. The first time that I took the wheelchair down, just because walking was too hard. And I go and I get to hold him for the first time, and well, technically for the second time. But it was just fabulous, and he was just the cutest, and he was in his NICU, in his incubator. So this was his card with all of his information that was taped to the incubator. And then this cute little thing is what the NICU nurses made. They make one for all of the kids, and so that's his footprints and his name, and they did a safari theme for him. And so I got to hold him, I got to feed him, and then starting then I was to come down every 2 to 3 hours, pretty much every 2 hours, to go down and to feed him. And after the first time, I would walk each time, and as painful as it was getting in and out of bed and the first little bit of walking, until I got to the elevator, it kind of hurt. But I think that's what really helped my recovery, because my C-section recovery was actually really easy. I did not have much pain. I really just had pain that first day, and I had pain around my incision. That pain kind of lasted a little while, and that was only if it was being touched, really. I think the worst pain the whole time was when they took the bandaging off, the tape that was all around, that hurt the worst of this whole experience. I think contractions included, that really hurt, which I was not prepared for. But after that, it wasn't that bad. And as far as other recovery for me, bleeding was not that bad at all. And I had been told from a lot of women and people I had talked to about how heavy the bleeding is and how long you bleed for. And for me, it was the first day or two was the first day or two of a heavy period. And then it was a normal period almost. It really wasn't that much. To the point where the big huge hospital pads that they provide were way too much, and it was a lot different than I thought. And I don't know if that's a C-section thing or not, if they got a lot of the blood out when they had me open, and so I didn't have a lot to bleed out. I don't know. I really don't. That's just my assumption. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Other weird things that, the one other like weird thing that happened to me after during my recovery there was my feet and ankles got huge, like crazy big. Like I was to the point where like the hospital socks were tight, and that's saying something. It was crazy, and it was like you would push it and it would stay indented because of how much fluid like built up from all the fluids they had on me from the IV and other things, and from laying in bed. And so they had suggested that I keep my feet up and elevated, and so anytime I was in bed I would try to put them up. I would put them on pillows, and then when I was at the NICU feeding him, that was when it was hard because the feedings would take a long time. Some of the times I was down there for like an hour, and there was nowhere to put your feet, and so that was hard. And so it took a really long time for the swelling to go down, like even until I left the hospital. Like they were still super swollen, like crazy. But yeah, my recovery was pretty good, and I would go down and feed him every 2 hours, and they kept monitoring his blood sugar. He was down there because of his blood sugar, and he could not regulate it, and so they were giving him glucose through his main line, which went into his belly button. And he was on oxygen for the first day. So on Saturday he was on oxygen because he was still struggling to breathe a bit, and he had a few episodes. On Sunday he was on room air. They still had the tubes in, but they were giving him just room air, which was really just to kind of remind him to breathe. And then Monday that was all taken off, but his poor little cheeks were so red from the tape. That's so sad. Sunday evening we had one of our friends came to visit, and she took some photos for us, and she took our first, and this is gonna make me cry, she took our first and last family picture of the three of us. And it's not like the best picture of me because this is one day after birth and I'm still all swollen, but it is a picture I will treasure forever because it's all we got. So I'm really, and she was kind of hesitant to come at first and didn't want to interrupt family time, and I'm so grateful that she came. She was the first person, not family member, to see him, but I'm really grateful that she came and that she did that for us, because we had no idea, you don't know how short life is and what's gonna happen, and so take pictures, people. Okay, back to a happy story. Let's be happy. Tuesday, I was discharged from the hospital, and they had a program at my hospital, and they would allow mothers to nest. So this is if a mother is being discharged before their child because of their child's in the NICU, and as long as there is room available, they will let the mother stay in their room in the maternity ward, and they would no longer receive any nursing care. You're responsible for getting your own prescriptions and taking your own medications. You basically just had the room, and they would also still feed you. You still got your meals. And so this is so that way you would be close by to be able to nurse. And so I nested on Tuesday and then again on Wednesday. And towards the evening on Wednesday, the person who was head of nursing there on the ward came to us and said that there was a lot of women in labor and there is a good possibility that they would need my room that night. But there was one other room on the ward and this room had 2 beds, and they try not to ever use that room because they want all the mothers to have a private room. But she said if needed, me and the one other nesting mother could go and share that room for that night. Both dads would have to go home. It would be just the mothers. But we could stay in that room for that night. So we packed up our stuff. Patrick went home and he was really, really upset about having to go home and leaving both of us at the hospital. But we didn't have a choice. So I stayed the night in that room with a roommate, and she was lovely. I had seen her. Her baby was right next to mine in the NICU, so I'd seen her every once in a while. Thursday morning, that head of nursing came in again and said, I'm sorry, but we need this room too. So by 9 o'clock, I need you guys to kind of move out. So again, I packed up my stuff, and I had sent the majority of my stuff home with Patrick, knowing that was very likely the case, is that they would need this room as well, and I would no longer be able to nest, period. So I just kind of kept the bare necessities. So I had 1 hospital bag, and so I had kept that, and I needed to stay in the hospital for the day because I was still nursing, and Lincoln was still in the NICU, and I was starting to get a little bit desperate to get him home because I wanted to nurse, I wanted to breastfeed, that was important to me, but I needed to sleep too, and I no longer had a room, I no longer had a place in the hospital that I could stay, and so I would need to go home. And being a C-section, I was not allowed to drive for 2 weeks. And the baby needs to eat every 2 hours, and I live a half hour away. And so even if I could go home and if I could drive, I can't. It was just, I needed him to come home. And I was just not producing enough milk for him. He was not regulating. It would get a little bit better, but not near what it needed to be for him to come home. And so finally I made the decision to just supplement formula. So they had me use this little guy, and I don't remember what it's called, but I will link it, or I'll put it somewhere on the screen and I'll link it below what it is. And so I would pump, and what I would pump would go into a little container like this, and it would screw this on, and then a little clip just goes right on here, and you could clip this onto, I would clip it onto my robe, or in the NICU they had curtains that went around, so you hook it onto the curtain or whatever. So you hook it on, and then you have this string, this tubing. So the tubing, you would hold it up to your breast, so that way when the baby latches, they latch on to your nipple as well as the tube, so they're getting both at the same time. So we would do my breast milk first that I pumped, and then they would take this off and replace it with a little thing of formula, a 2-ounce little bottle of formula. So we would do that, and his numbers started to go up finally. And so every time his numbers was in a certain range, they would drop the glucose level. So if it was above, I'm trying to remember what the numbers were. I think if it was like above 80, they would drop it 2 points. And if it was above, it was between like 60 and 80, they would drop it 1. But if it was under 60, it would stay the same. And they would check every 2 hours. And so his numbers were finally going up and staying up. And I was getting really excited. And then we had a few setbacks where his numbers dropped a lot. And they ended up bringing, instead of dropping it down, they actually brought it back up a little bit. And a few times they wanted to keep it consistent. So this is all happening Wednesday. So Thursday comes, the baby's numbers, glucose levels, are in a range where they could keep dropping it 2. And if they kept dropping it 2 every 2 hours, he would be able to come home that night. So I was getting really hopeful. And the formula really was like that one thing that kind of pushed us over the edge. And so Thursday night at 10 o'clock at night, we are finally discharged. Me and him. He's finally allowed to come home. I was able to put his going home outfit on. Patrick came and picked us up, and it was so exciting. It was so great to finally take him out of there after a full week in the hospital. To finally see him without any cords or tubes or anything on him. It was great. Okay, so when we were discharged from the NICU, they gave me this cute little bracelet. I should take it off this. But they have different beads, and each bead has a different meaning. And I just thought that was so cute, and a little memory of his stay at the NICU. The NICU nurses are seriously the best. They are so sweet and so kind and so helpful. And we just had an amazing experience. Some of them were like a mom and like kind of bossed me around and told me like what I should do. But all out of love and wanting the best for me and for the baby and just trying to be helpful. It was a little frustrating at times though, I will say. And even just the other day, right after Patrick passed away, I was in Hobby Lobby to get something to display pictures for the funeral, and the woman behind me in the checkout line was one of my NICU nurses, and she turned around and she remembered me, and she was asking how the baby was, and remembered the baby's name and everything. Like he was only there for a week, but they really treat the babies as if they're their own. And being in the NICU was a really interesting experience, and it gave me a whole new level of respect for NICU moms and things that they go through. And my experience was extremely mild. He was healthy for the most part. He just had this one little issue, and they were able to take care of that relatively quickly. And there were a lot of babies in there that were a lot worse off, and babies that would be in there for months. And I'm just so grateful that he was healthy and that I was finally able to take him home, and he was only there for a week. It was the longest week of my life, but it was just a week, and I'm grateful. I love this little boy. He is the light of my life, and I can't imagine my life without him. Okay, I just want to thank you guys for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, things that I forgot to include, you want more details on a certain thing, just let me know. I was trying to get as much as I could without being like the video being ridiculously long and boring. So if you have any specific questions or other things, please feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer. If you like this video, you want to see more from me, please subscribe, like this video if you liked it. And again, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Got the hiccups though, boy. Poor little guy. You look so sad. You look so concerned. It's okay.
How are you? No.
Oh, bless you. Oh, bless you. Hands look huge when I do that. Why are my hands so big compared to my face? Is that like real life? I have huge hands. Holy cow. So he got a starfish for being admitted to the NICU, a fish for the first bath, a heart for the first time held by mommy, a sparkle bead for the first time fed by mouth, an L for his initial, a glow bead for a special study like an x-ray, etc. He got a blue star for a decrease in respiratory support, so for going off of oxygen. He got a turquoise bead for being in an open crib. So right before they let you go home, he's allowed to be in an open crib instead of an incubator. He got a yellow for all of his feeding by mouth. Actually, no, he didn't get that. Just kidding. Just kidding, he didn't get that because he had that glucose. Sorry, I'm looking at the champagne. He got champagne for his medication course complete. Coral for a central line going away. And a boat for going home.